Hello and welcome to the Paranormal Tourists. I'm your host, Tom Jordan. This always stresses me out. Sat to my left, that's not how it works. Sat to my left is Danny Magellan. Say hello, Danny.
Hello, Danny.
50 episodes. This is our 50th episode, and it has not got old yet. Or has it?
No, never, no.
It's aging well, like a
fine wine.
The joke, not Danny Magellan.
Oh,
you do know that fine wines can go off, don't you? So.
Like a fine vinegar.
It's a joke that has sort of corked and needs to be done.
John likes it.
Ahead of me, but in reality many hundreds of miles away, because we're recording over the glory that is Zoom, is paranormal expert. I still always go to say paranormal tourist, just because it's such a catchy name. Paranormal expert Ross Andrews. He's saying hello.
Sorry, we're on Zoom, and I always forget to turn the mic on, so I thought I'd go with that today.
I was expecting something French or Russian or...
No, it was French and Russian.
It was French and Russian.
It was a mixture of the two, but without the microphone on for anybody that's listening to the podcast, not watching the podcast, as we're hopefully putting this out on our... well, it depends, because if you are watching this, or should I say, if you're not watching this and you're listening to the audio version on Spotify, this is really weird because Tom keeps disappearing, literally merging into the background behind him. So... Oh, no, and now Dan is gone as well.
My background, which is an old abandoned church, old disused church, I'd say, not quite abandoned. And because this is our 50th episode, a very special episode, we are actually joined this evening by two guests who have
very special guests,
foolishly, willingly set themselves up to be part of.
We bribed them,
threatened them to be part of tonight's episode. So we have returning from many moons ago. The very wise and welcome Matty boy, whatever you want to call him. Some call him the ferryman. Not to be...
All right. Oh, you spoke over my trademark, all right. How do you leave a Zoom call?
I can kick you if you like. I don't know if I...
His trademark enthusiasm coming through the screen at me.
I was holding my breath so I didn't breathe down my mic because you were doing all of the introductions, thinking, right, make sure the first time I'm heard, it's just that all right, and you spoke over it.
Do you want to run it again, Matthew?
No, it's ruined.
Matthew.
50th anniversary.
Well, we've been missing your vibrant energy. So good that back. And we're joined this evening by a newcomer to the Paranormal Tourists, but I have on good authority, by no means a newcomer to the world of the paranormal.
I mean, we know him.
We have spoken about this person a few times on the podcast, particularly when we were talking about Prestbury. I think his name has come up a few times.
He's gonna get a complex at this rate. There's been people talking for 50 episodes about this. This gentleman before me, again hundreds of miles away, is also paranormal expert Paul Tudor.
Good evening. I was going to do a nice intro, but Matt did it, so.
The big secret is this is actually the secret is in the initials. It's not really the Paranormal Tourists. It is PT podcast, but it's actually the Paul Tudor podcast where we've just sat for 50 episodes.
I'm just late. That's fine. I'm always late.
The only reason we're called Paranormal Tourists, Paul, is because it's taken you 50 episodes to turn up. It was the Paul Tudor podcast, and we had to quickly think of a name on the very first episode.
The amount of times that you said, "Are you coming up?" Yeah, and I forgot all about it. I forgot. We used to, when Ross and I first started investigating together. Ross say, "Oh, you come in so and so." I said, "What's that?" Well, you remember I told you about so and so? I don't remember. And so basically, Ross was my secretary. He'd ring up the day before, going, "Don't forget, tomorrow I'll be round with it." So yeah.
That's the beauty of ghosts, though, isn't it? I mean, they're already dead. They'll still be there tomorrow. You can turn up a day late.
You obviously don't take into account the calendar ghosts that always turn up on the days when they're supposed to be there.
Monday ghosts, not Tuesday ghosts. I get it.
Yes.
We love a calendar. We love a calendar ghost.
Paul has seen a calendar ghost, an actual calendar ghost that we have talked about in the past. And if anybody can remember an episode where we were talking about Prestbury, Paul is the person who nearly ran over a ghost.
Or someone dressed up. But whatever it was, it didn't move, and I did. I had to swerve around it and go into the other lane, and I should have stopped, but I went.
And that's the calendar ghost that was the Black Abbot in the Prestbury episodes, and he turns up theoretically 5 times a year. One of which is an Easter sighting, so that's one to look forward to. It won't turn up, but it's supposed to turn up at that point. Virtually every single sighting that I've read of about the Black Abbot in Prestbury is not on a day where he's supposed to turn up. It's always some other time.
Amazing.
Maybe then, just like Paul, he's often very late.
Are you going to go
and we both like dressing up in robes.
A child-related issue. So is it the Black Abbot that you've seen?
Yeah.
What?
Well, whatever it was dressed. I don't know how well you know Prestbury, but if I was coming through Prestbury with the King's Arms on the right-hand side, so you get to Chemist Corner, you bend round the corner, and then this thing was diagonally in the middle of the road, as if it would have walked down the path or down the alleyway at the side of the chemist and diagonally across the road to church building on the other side.
Yeah.
And it was stationary there, and it was between 12 and 1 o'clock in the morning. I come round the corner, and if it was someone dressed up, they didn't flinch, they didn't move, they didn't go car, and it was just a black, solid, hooded figure.
And if you want to hear Paul tell that story again, you can track down on YouTube an episode where we were filming in Prestbury with Michaela for Great British Ghost Series 1, I think it was. And there's a few people there. When he talks about the chemist, I think we actually filmed a few of the people in the chemist who talk about a ghost that they've seen there as well.
That's amazing.
Now, I also talk about a ghost in that episode and got something factually wrong, so we filmed it again, and they put out the bit which I'd got wrong, not the bit that we went back and refilmed. So the amount of people were going, this man doesn't know what he's talking about. This person didn't die here. He died. I'm going, I know. So if you do watch that, then be aware, I know it's wrong. Okay.
About the like someone's experienced the Black Abbot. I mean, having grown up in Cheltenham, I mean that's phenomenal. That would be like if you told me
at least 3 other people that have seen it as well.
Is Prestbury also well known for, because I've never heard of the Black Abbot, and I've lived quite close to Prestbury my whole life. The one that I heard was, maybe this is somewhere else, like a Roman chariot with horses, or maybe a Victorian, some form of horse-pulled carriage.
Both of what you've just said are technically half correct.
Right.
There is a horse-drawn carriage that's a funeral procession that's seen on the road leading out to Southam. There are Roman ghosts that are possibly seen coming across the fields as well, from the big hotels out the back across towards the racecourses. So you're kind of half correct on both your stories.
I was never good at history.
I don't want to take it to kind of, our personal kind of unrelated anecdote, but the plough in Prestbury, there's a church opposite that you may recall, very creepy. You walk out at night. That's the Black Abbot Church. That's the
in the pub, the Plough, for those listening, a lovely tiny pub in Prestbury. That, am I right in saying some of the tables, it used to be where they'd saw their dead, and some of the tables are made up of old slabs that they would use to keep. Obviously, they've been cleaned. I hope
the tables aren't anymore, but there were various aspects of the building that incorporated stone taken from graves. In the graveyard. But the tables themselves aren't, partly because they're not that old now. They've been replaced and so on over the years. But you are correct. There are elements of the building that come from gravestones. There's another one that I know, and I'm not sure if we've talked about this on the podcast before, but we were doing a ghost hunt in a very, very famous artist's house. And were you there, Paul? I remember this.
Yeah. You and I
an extremely famous artist who's worth unbelievably large amount of money. And his bathroom had a walk-in shower unit thing. His bathroom is bigger than almost my flat, right? It's huge. But the walls, ceilings and floors were all made out of gravestones, real gravestones that had been removed from a church, a decommissioned church. That was only, I think there was one gravestone that was only about 100 years old, wasn't it? I think. So it's almost like living memory. Yeah. And
it's as if they've taken down the churchyard and just said, here's the headstones.
And we were doing, we did a Ouija board and... we won't get into trouble for saying who it was, will we?
I don't know, because I don't know.
Put it this way, he didn't have his trademark sharks in formaldehyde in his house. So we were... now, we haven't said it and we can't get into trouble because we can now deny it. So we were doing a Ouija board in his bathroom, surrounded by gravestones. We came up with some interesting things, and I think we spooked out a lot of the workers there because... they'd had things happen and noises happen and things get moved and so on, and that's why we went in there, because my dad happened to be working on the building as well, and did for many years. I don't think the guy ever moved into the building, but we had an interesting in fact, I think, yes, I'm going to talk about a place very near there later on, so I'm going to keep stum now.
I mean, as usual, I've got something thoroughly researched and prepared to share with the class. I sort of almost feel like, there's so much that I think we can talk about as a group. So much. I think it's exciting to hear from your experiences, Paul, and you and Ross together as well. But in the time-honoured tradition of Paranormal Tourists, I suppose I better kind of shift back onto the story, and then we'll come back to all that stuff, because I think I'd just love to hear more.
Well, Tom, if we're talking tradition, I will now start my tradition. There we go.
Hey!
Non-brand Jaffas.
Are they non-brand? They best be non-brand.
Of
look
course.
at that. Amazing.
There we are, Jaffa cakes and scotch.
And
so I'm doing this totally traditionally.
Totally. Well, in that case, so as it's the 50th episode, I thought I would return to
Roots.
the ancient tome. Am I going to appear for those people watching? Oh, you can see it for those people who are
This might be for some
visual
people.
recording.
For some people, this might be the first time they're seeing
Might be the
it.
first time they've ever seen it. If you're new to this
Now
book,
you've both gone. Oh, there we go.
I feel like I can reintroduce it because it's been a while. So this is a book published in 1992. It's The Amazing Spooks and Mysteries by Peter Eldon. That actually pulls together stories from two different books. And this is a book I had as a child that I was obsessed with, and I would say is probably a big part of the root of my interest in the paranormal. This is a copy that I bought on eBay when we first started doing this podcast. Smells like the same book. Smells great. Like that second-hand book smell.
Smells like
So
1992.
I'd like to imagine it is like the Action Man I once found in a
Charity shop.
in a charity
That was
shop.
crazy.
That was I had it up to Danny and was like, "This is my Action Man." She said, "Oh, that's great. You had one like that." I was like, "No, this is my Action Man. I haven't seen this for 15 years. This was an Action Man I'd drawn all over the face in a very artistic manner."
And then the lady in the shop could not give less of a shit when we told her the story.
Or, as I just put out to Paul here, or if you'd like to listen to more of that story, go back to episode 17, where, as this book should actually be called Series 1 Paranormal Tourists, episodes 1 to 45.
This is the I retired it for a while, but it seems like an appropriate time to bring it back. So although I have, and I found this particularly interesting because I looked at, it's only a short extract, which I won't read word for word, but
Because of copyright.
Trouble. But I've cross-referenced this with an article I found on the internet as well. And what I found really interesting most of the time when I do, look up a story in a couple of places, it's essentially just the same information, but actually this has a slightly different account. The title of this in the book is The Screaming Skull, which is is a really I remember reading that as a kid, and even now it sort of sticks in my head, this idea of this horrendous screaming, and it centres around a woman called Anne Griffiths or Catherine. Top cuckoo clock.
That made me jump already. I'm really ready for this story.
Maybe we should have muted that.
Cookie clock is unreal.
I thought that was the introduction to the book. That's how it started. It was a twist book.
I think it's going to be from now on. I think that's the. So Catherine Griffith or Catherine Anne, known as Anne, was she 17th century? In fact, I've got a date here written from the other article, which is year 1620 is when she died at Burton Agnes Hall in Yorkshire, and she was very, very attached to her place of residence, and had often commented to her sisters that she wouldn't ever want to be removed from the place. But she rather sadly, she was savagely beaten by robbers. Why are you laughing? Why is that funny? Why is that funny? Savagely attacked. I'm glad I didn't go with the other article, which refers to them as ruffians. She was savagely attacked by ruffians. But it took a few days for her to die. So when she was, that's not.
I think Danny's just trying to keep it light.
She was at home, and she was.
Hang on, Tom. She normally gets away with this because there's no cameras. And whenever you listen to the podcast, if Danny's gone quiet for 5 minutes, she's on the floor in hysterics. But we normally manage to cut this out. But now we can't do this because we can see her.
Can't I edit that one out, baby?
No, it's only because you were like, oh, all this good stuff, and then she was brutally murdered. It was the delivery.
It's a long time ago. So anyway, she and there's other details here, and so but the essentially she died over a period of days, and some of the time she was kind of with it, some of the time she was delirious, but she made a very specific request. I've disappeared on screen. She made a very specific request, which is kind of unusual, but because she was so determined to remain part of this house, she requested that her head be buried within the walls of the building. Now, that's a bit odd, and it turns out that everyone else thought so as well. So they buried her in the churchyard because she'd been beaten, she was a bit delirious, and that's a very strange thing to request. Probably devalue the house to some extent. Now this is where we get the two different accounts. Now the book, as the name suggests, and I think the more dramatically impressive version of the story, suggests that because the head was not buried within the house, a horrific screaming was heard throughout the house. So after the funeral, screams were heard in the house. The noise was so terrifying that I'll come to that bit in a second. So the noise was horrific, that they took drastic action. In the story I found online, the ghost appeared. So her ghost appeared within the house, which is also scary, but I feel it's just slightly less atmospheric than the screaming skull. But it was so problematic in the end, allegedly, that the vicar of the village church actually agreed to allow them to exhume part of the body so that they could take the skull and place it within the building.
If I remember rightly, Tom, this if the skull's in the building, there is no ghost, no screaming or anything like that. It's only if the skull was removed, because it's been removed a couple of times, I think, throughout the years.
Okay. Well, interesting. I haven't got the only information I've got is that it's still in the house, built onto one of the walls. Although they don't seem to know where it is. But yes, certainly, the information I've got here, and I'm no doubt you guys can expand on it. But the information I've got is that essentially that, as you say, when the skull is in the building, when the skull is in, it's all fine and dandy, apart from the fact that there's weirdly a skull in the building. But if her I can't think of the word. If her
skull.
If what she laid out anyway isn't followed, so if the skull is removed or previously when her instructions, If that's not followed, then there is either a very scary ghost or there's horrific screaming.
Well, Tom, I can agree with you for the sole reason I have a skull here that I would be very annoyed if it got removed. I don't know if you can see this, but because it's in Zoom, it's a skull glass with a whiskey in it. So I would be annoyed if the skull was removed.
I imagine there was screaming as well. There would be
very good thematic.
and you'd go wandering about the house.
What was her
The
name
screaming
again?
came from your broken toe the other day.
Yes, that's true. Yes, I did get rather injured.
Her name, so Anne Griffith, and it's and you can visit the place. I mean, probably not at the moment, but it's Burton Agnes Hall
Definitely not at the moment.
in Yorkshire.
I think. Now you say you can't visit at the moment. I think the plans are that in a week or two they'll be opening up the gardens.
Okay.
And I know this because they are world famous for snowdrops, if it's the hall I think it is. And they do a snowdrop walk thing for charity, and you walk through the woods. And I think the plan is, because that's technically outdoors and all that kind of stuff, if they're allowed to, they will be opening up. But from a paranormal tourist point of view, if I remember the story rightly, once or twice they removed the skull and it screamed so much they brought it back. I don't think the skull is visible at the moment. I think you even said something about it's being bricked up or something, or placed in the walls or something like that. So what we're actually reporting on is no ghost.
Yeah.
Unless you can break into the walls, remove the skull, it's not a ghost that you can actually see anyway.
You can go to a place where a ghost once happened, and I guess as well, once people are allowed to move freely, you could go to the churchyard.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that by the very nature of ghosts, surely we are all in a place where a ghost once happened.
No, where people once happened, not necessarily where a ghost once happened.
Yeah,
I mean, Matt, you're talking to the resident skeptic, so I'm kind of, it's all a pinch of salt, wool with a pinch of salt.
I mean, either way, this Anne woman sounds absolutely horrific. It was terrible what happened to her, but she had such an unreasonable request. And then when it wasn't followed out, when they didn't take down part of the house and put part of her corpse in it, she then proceeded. Yeah, she did. She just screamed at people for no good reason at all hours.
I think I might make the same request.
I do know that you can't get to that place at the moment. There's a possibility of getting to it, but as we just said, we are kind of talking about a ghost that you are not likely to experience unless you can break down the wall and find the skull. But
which we're not recommending. Please don't.
No. But there is another similar one nearby, because that's Yorkshire, and there is a place which is Temple Newsham, which is Leeds, I think, so not too far. And it's a museum and a stately home. See, Tom has now disappeared off our screens as he's now searching on the internet, isn't he? This place. But I think it's an English heritage place. That's why it's coming to mind. And similar thing, a woman who died was after being attacked. So she was beaten up whilst being attacked by highwaymen, and she was quite young. She was like a teenager, and she had her pearls stolen. I think it is a necklace stolen. And she then died a few days later, and she's still haunting the grounds and everything, looking for the pearls. That building is a museum, and it's obviously not open at the moment for obvious reasons. But she has been seen in the grounds, and I think you can get into the grounds. I'm not sure, but do check it on the website. I think it might be an English heritage. I'm not sure, but she is known as the Blue Lady. Actual tourism.
I'm gonna bite. Why blue?
Because she was a Smurf.
Smurf ghost. I'm with you.
No, just because she was dressed in blue, I think that's the only reason. I don't think she's going around playing sort of BB King and singing the blues or anything.
Jokes for the dads.
That is a shame.
So that is an actual tourist one. You could go for a similar type of ghost. There's also, and I mean, obviously at the moment you can't go anywhere, but if you are within walking distance of these places, you can get there. There is one that sometimes is open to the public and sometimes isn't, depending on who owns it, and that's Little Dean Hall in the Forest of Dean, that has another thing that can't be removed from a house, and that is a blood stain on the floor that keeps reappearing, and it's not supposed to be thought of as good luck if you see this thing, where there was a duel between two people. Little Dean Hall is extremely haunted. It's got about 5 or 6 different ghosts in it, and the blood stain, I think, either, because there's 2 ghosts, and I can't remember which one it relates to. One of them is a slave who killed his master when the master got his sister pregnant, and there's another one where 2 Civil War ghosts, I think, appear, where they had a battle in the house, shot each other, and the blood stained the floor. And it's one of those 2 ghost stories, but both ghosts appear. And that's Little Dean. But the problem with Little Dean Hall is I think it's privately owned at the moment. And the reason I know about a lot of these ghosts is because a friend of mine tried to buy it about 20 or 30 years ago. And he didn't tell me until after this cropped up in conversation. We were talking about ghosts, and I said about Little Dean Hall. And he went, "Oh, I nearly bought that one." And it was, we could have had so many investigations there. But if you're in the area of Little Dean, and when museums and things open up again, so this is the Forest of Dean, Gloucestershire. I know I've gone from Yorkshire down to Gloucestershire, but there's a fantastic place that Paul and I have been to, and I think we've talked about it before, which is Little Dean Jail.
Oh.
I don't know if you can remember, we've talked about that one.
We have, and it's somewhere that we've always wanted to go, and we've actually turned up there 3 times, and each time, for like random reasons, it was closed.
You can actually appears in the Netflix documentary.
Does it?
Yeah, in Dark Tourists,
Dark
he goes
Tourist.
to visit Little Dean. He comes to the UK.
Oh, fantastic.
And goes as Little Dean Jail.
But it's the kind of place that when it does open up, even though you're not likely to see a ghost, let's face it, with all the paranormal investigations Paul and I have done, we could probably, what would you say, apart from the castle, Paul, how many ghosts would you say we've seen? Any? No.
A handful at most of something you could go, was that a figure or something like that, but it's mainly auditory or poltergeist. But to see something, it's been very, very rare. 4 or 5 times.
But at the museum, it's a fantastic place to go, because we took a ghost hunt there once, and we split everybody up and said, you go in this room, you go in that room, write down this and so on if anything happens. And they all came back, and I just said, okay, what happened? And they went, oh, we didn't write anything down. I said, well, why not? Oh, well, we were reading this thing, and we looked at this, and that thing on the wall was so fascinating. I was taken up by that. And they literally had just spent the day like going around a museum, completely forgot to do any ghost hunting whatsoever. It is amazing, but don't take kids there. It's a bit gory and horrible. You have to be careful which rooms you take them into.
Yeah, we will get there one day.
Well, next time you're up here, if it's safe to do so, we'll grab Paul and we'll head down to the forest. And
when you say it's safe to do so, do you mean safe to do so like from a pandemic point of view, but safe to do so to grab Paul? Like, which is the danger?
I'm not sure which one will come first.
I'll make sure my nails are cut. That's all.
You can come too, Matthew, if you like. You're invited.
Oh, thank you.
We'll swing by and grab you.
But we will blank out your face.
Good.
For those of you listening to the podcast, Matt isn't on screen. All right, so that makes sense. Sorry, I'm shooting off my stories here, and we haven't even got anywhere close to a Danny connection or link, and I'm wasting all my links.
What do you got for us? How are you going to link?
Wow.
What are you going to link to what?
To be totally honest, I'm just
in awe.
Very excited about our namesake being here. And still reeling, because of course on the 12th of January it was Michael Aspel's 88th birthday. So to be honest, with it only being early February, I'm still recovering from that.
Don't want to peak.
Yeah, that's my. But yeah, I was only really going to mention, because I don't want to say too much, because like I say, I'm really excited about our guest tonight. One, I was going to say, happy 50th episode. That's very exciting.
Hey.
At the beginning, when we were eating non-brand and sitting around our dining table, I don't think we ever thought we'd necessarily get to. I mean, we never thought we'd get to this situation.
We get to episode 2,
where
the end of episode 1.
Yeah, it was touch and go. But no, it's very exciting, and I would like to say thank you to everyone who listens to the podcast, enjoys the podcast. John, I also want to, number one fan, John, and I also want to give a shout out to, and she's been mentioned on many episodes, but it's amazing that we're doing it on today, but today is the 10th of February, and it's Naked Nana's birthday. So a very happy birthday to my poor mother, who, it could be said, we bully, but only affectionately. But yeah, so I just wanted to sort of take the opportunity to say thank you to everyone. And then...
Well, Danny, I think you've got to press a button now to bring up screen 5, where Naked Nana will be naked on the screen.
What time is it? Yeah, it's 9 o'clock. She'll have a couple of gins.
Oh, she'll have had several bottles of Prosecco by now. But yeah, please don't let's do that to anybody. No, I adore her and she knows that. But she's not invited. The other thing I was going to mention is that behind us, if you're watching this, we have a background, and it's the Spire in Brighton, which is this beautiful church venue where Tom was in a production of... Well, you've been in a few productions, actually, haven't you? Yeah. But one notably was of a production of Dracula. And I've been there several times because I just used to turn up at rehearsals. I had nothing better to do, and I'd often baked things. It was when Great British Bake Off was on, and sort of as an emotional crutch, I would just bake a lot of goods, and I can't eat them all, so I'd take them to the cast. And there were these lights that would move. And I have got a photo, or even like a little video, of one of, so you know, in the green room, as it were, there'd be these two lights that are suspended by wires, and one would just be still, and the other one, and people watching, you're in for one hell of a visual. The other one would do this. Yeah.
And now, for those of you who are listening to the podcast, not watching it, not much is happening.
It would slightly waver, and so I thought,
it was quite, because it was a heavy light, and it was quite a swing, like a pendulum swing. I've forgotten that.
Yeah, and it used to happen quite a lot. And because I would often, when they were on stage, if I wasn't watching the performance, as a lot of them were sold out, it was very good. True story. Check them out on Facebook. They're obviously, because it's a pandemic, nothing is happening that brings any joy, but it will eventually happen again. So check them out and give them a follow. However, I'd be sat in the green room a lot, and this one light would just keep moving, and it was very, very creepy. So I thought I'd make it our background, and then just sort of clumsily mention it.
What production was that?
That was Dracula.
That was Dracula. So you were being haunted by swingers backstage
in Brighton.
In Brighton. All right, excellent. Yeah. Well,
some fun.
To link to Tom, in fact, I'm going to link to Paul. So remind me the Dracula link to Tom, who was talking about a Yorkshire venue. But Paul, you've investigated. Well, our group has investigated a place where Dracula was filmed for the BBC, and they filmed in Woodchester.
That's right.
And anybody who's into ghost hunting has probably heard of Woodchester. It was an episode. It was one of the first live episodes of Most Haunted, and the ghost group that Paul and I were in, which is a Cheltenham-based group, went along and helped Most Haunted. But we've been there. I know there's a guy there called Chris who does a lot of the ghost hunting that we did a TV show with called Ghost Hunters, I think. I can't remember what it's called. They did an episode there. And Paul's investigated there without me. How dare you?
Yeah.
And in your opinion, Paul, is Woodchester haunted in the slightest?
Yeah. To keep the money rolling in, yes, very. For me, not so much. But there was some some interesting things that happened, but I can't say they weren't done by somebody else. We had potential poltergeist activity. There were stones that were falling from, I think it was in the kitchen area where there's no ceiling, so it goes up 2-3 stories. And there was these stones that kept dropping, and everyone was saying, it's not us, it's not us. But there were people stood by the edges, higher up, that could easily be kicking the stones over without realising.
And Paul and I have been in investigations with night vision goggles, because quite often we'll get asked to go along to other people's investigations. Whether that lends it some air of credibility, I don't know. But Paul and I were at one once with a group, and I won't say who they were, but in this one particular room, they were getting a lot of stones falling. And so we sat next to each other with these really good night vision goggles on, going, yeah, I can see him throwing the stone now. And there's another one.
No.
And there's another one. So, yeah, it does happen. There's a lot of fakery, particularly with commercial ghost hunting. Because if you've got 50 people in the place who've paid 50 quid each to be there, these people, and it's almost done from a nice place. They kind of want people to have a spooky experience.
Yeah.
And so they kind of go, well, nothing's happening. I'll kind of kickstart something happening. So at least they've gone away feeling happy. And we've seen that a few times in investigations. I won't name names, but we've certainly seen a few, haven't we, Paul?
Do you remember, Ross, when we did the vigil at the Playhouse Theatre in Cheltenham, which we've spoken about a lot of times because it's very of activity there, and we did scrying and we went all around everywhere. And I remember there was someone there. Well, I certainly, when we did the scrying, my friend, we'll call her, and I've done this gag before, but I'm going to do it again. We'll call her Lottie because that's her name. We were staring in the mirror in one of the dressing rooms, and I was looking at myself, and I was like, "Well, nothing's happening. This is bollocks." And then I looked over to Lottie, and her face had totally changed. Although that's slightly irrelevant, but that was just a mention of scrying. But when we did that event, there was nothing created, but I did notice that there were a few people there that sort of came away with, I remember someone talking about something that was sitting on top of the roof when they left, someone talking about, so I think there's some people, if you don't create it for them, they'll create it themselves.
Yeah, we found, I've tried to explain to people when they say, oh, well, you could be faking this. We don't need to. We never need to, because if nothing's happening, 50% of the people there think it is.
Yeah.
And it makes no difference. Paul and I were in a theatre once, and it wasn't the theatre that we thought we were going to.
This is a story I was just going to say.
Go on, Paul, you take it.
Well, yeah, it wasn't in Nottingham. We know that much, don't we?
We'd started in Nottingham.
Yeah.
We'd driven from Cheltenham to Nottingham.
Is this when you were supposed to be in like Northampton or something?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love this story.
Yeah.
It was an interesting drive.
Yeah. I mean, he's ringing up saying, "Where are you?" We're outside so-and-so door, and they're going, "Where? You know where so-and-so is?" And they go, "It's not here." "You sure it's right theatre in Northampton?" Hello. Nottingham. Hello. Right. See you in a minute. Yeah. I think we made it about 10 minutes to spare, didn't we?
But at that investigation, we got there. We thought we were there to just sort of help out. And it turned out we got there, we walked in, and they said, well, you're on in 10 minutes, so good job you managed to get here in time. And we set off really early, hoping to investigate the theatre before we got there, hadn't we, Paul? And it was, thankfully, we'd given ourselves a good 2 hours early time to set up. And we got to this other theatre, Derngate Theatre, that was one, with 10 minutes to spare. And Paul and I are getting this stuff out of the car. And we had another guy with us who is worse than useless. And he'd arranged everything, right? And so we were getting this stuff out, and then we're carrying these boxes, and I said, okay, well, that was lucky. We just about got here on time. I would like someone to explain to me what do they mean that I'm going on stage in 10 minutes. And he went, oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you that. I then had to go on stage and give a talk for an hour, totally unprepared, had no idea what we were there to talk about or anything. And it was, we bluffed through it and went, oh yeah, we've got this prepared and we know what we're doing and all that. And so Paul was my ghost gimp, handing me various tools on stage. And I said, "What have we got next, Paul?" And he would just grab something off the table and hand it to me. He'd go, "The EMF meter. Yeah, cheers. I knew you were getting me that. Thanks." And then we talk about all this equipment. But that night, Paul and I and Mr. Useless got to investigate at midnight. We got to investigate the theatre because everybody went out the front to the sort of restaurant-y bit and had a midnight feast. And whilst they were doing that, the three of us were in the theatre, and we were the only three people in the auditorium. And we're sat in the dress circle, and the pair of us... Well, you explain it, Paul. What did you hear?
Well, it was just a bang, and it was like from the door by me. So I went running down, opened the door, nothing there. Then it was bang, and it was on the other side of the auditorium, and you went running over there, and then there was another bang, and it was from somewhere else, and so he who shan't be named went running off somewhere else, and it was just constant. Wherever we were, the noise came from the other end of the theatre.
But everybody was accounted for. They were all out the front. Every single person in the building was accounted for. There was nobody else backstage. But the three of us were experiencing this amazing stuff going on. We were saying, "Can you bang the door again?" You hear bang, but it came from another part of the building. So I think it was 6 different places. So unless there were 6 people somehow hiding that hadn't been visible all night, that's what we were seeing and hearing constantly. But what we then did at the end of the night was everybody went into the auditorium and we stood on stage and we did this thing that we normally do, where we say, "All right, you've all been in separate groups. What did anybody experience, let's say, on the stage? Anybody get anything?" And you might get one person say, "Oh, I heard a bang and I saw this," or whatever. But they haven't interacted until that point in theory. You're not supposed to have told anyone the stories. And for an hour, Paul and I sat there on this stage listening to people tell fantastic stories about ghosts that they had encountered in the building. And they would talk for a good 10 minutes about this figure that they'd seen and so on and like that. And we're going, "And you saw that?" And they go, "Well, I saw it in my mind." And it was like, right, okay. And it must, about an hour, Paul? We were sat there. And all of these people were coming up with things that they had experienced and seen and felt. Not one person had seen or heard anything real world, as it were. And the three of us, who hadn't paid 50 odd quid to be there, like these people had, we'd had an amazing night.
Do you think maybe they're part of that is you had the luxury of knowing that you were the only 3 people back there, I suppose. If they work there, they might think, "Oh, that's, I don't know, so-and-so's probably up there doing whatever," and not think about it. So maybe they did see it, and that's, that ghostly things might be happening all the time, you just don't know.
I would agree with you, except for the fact that the people they would describe would be in 17th century dress. One of them was hiding behind a curtain and kept peeking out and things like this, and they were dressed. And when it comes to other buildings, and Paul and I have both got experience of this at st.briavels Castle, and we'll constantly talk about it, but it is the most haunted building in the world. You talk to the staff, and quite often the staff will say, "Oh, nothing's happened," and then you reel through a whole bunch of things. You say, "Oh, well, because staff who've been here for a couple of weeks, they normally complain about the footsteps upstairs," and they go, "Oh, well, yeah, I've heard that. I didn't realise that was one of the things." And they say, and sometimes the sound of the dog just walking past the office, and they went, "Oh, I heard a dog walking past the office." And so it's things that they have gone, that's just a sound in the building. And it's not until it's pointed out to them that it corresponds to a ghost story that they suddenly go, "Oh, hang on," and they start writing them down. And then you get this massive list of how they all correlate together.
That's very cool. So whilst we have 2 paranormal experts, we do actually, and this is very exciting, we have a couple of fan questions.
Woo!
I know.
This is dangerous, isn't it?
I know, it is dangerous, so I apologise.
And all of them are for Naked Nana.
And all of them are for Nana or John.
All of them are from
all of them are from John for Nana. No. So I will just put, in fact, there's only a couple because we didn't put anything out on social media where we were taking questions, but we mentioned that our 50th anniversary was coming up, and we did get one question from Naked Nana, who asked me to ask everybody here because I said that we would probably have a couple of special guests. So the question I pose to all of you is, what's the most frightening and or real paranormal experience you have had personally? So if we start, Matthew, maybe.
Okay, well, mine's not so long, and I think Paul was there, and Ross definitely was. It was a pub in Cheltenham, and Ross will be able to tell you which one, because I can't remember. And we were doing there was a ghost walk.
The Suffolk Arms, I think you were at.
Thank you.
Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. And it was one of those nights where, we did a bit of everything, and we were walking round, and at one point someone told me that there was a ghost of a child called Annabelle. I think it was something along those lines, and I got a good scaring with my friends without meaning to, but going, "Annabelle, are you here?" And they were like, "Who's Annabelle?" Matt's hearing voices. So it was, it was that kind of thing, and nothing was really happening. Apart from at one point there's a front bar and then a back room. In the back room had curtains, so it could split into three parts. At the back you had a conservatory, in the middle was a dance floor, and at the front was another private bar that could be opened out if the function room was being used. And there were a group in that private bar, and then a curtain, empty dance floor, and then us behind another curtain with Ross doing a little, I can't remember what we're doing, scrying or I can't remember. But I think
it was a table tipping type seance.
Yeah, it was something like that, and everything was moving. It was all going. It was all very creepy. And then we kept hearing someone walking across the dance floor. It was a laminated floor, and it was becoming really irritating. These people walking back and forth. And as Ross had set the evening up and was with us because we were the new kids, he was like, "I'll let me go and have a word." And essentially, Ross had gone over and asked them, and the only way someone could have come in was past them, and said, "Can you just stop? You're making a bit of a racket." And they said, "No, we're filming ourselves. Look, here's the proof." And not one of them moved, and no one walked through there at all. So there was, even though we were closed off by curtains so we couldn't see, we could all hear, and they could hear it too and assumed it was us. But there were just these phantom footsteps, and I think that's probably the most paranormal experience I've had.
That's exciting.
I think I'm going to go next, because mine, I think, is really understated and definitely not scary. But I feel like Paul and Ross are going to have something more exciting. But mine, I think we had a variety of situations. I've been, that's really strange, and maybe kind of for me have been maybe a bit creepier, but it's probably been all about imagination. But this was a sort of really low key thing, and it was at a place which was mentioned before, called St. Donat's Castle, and should talk about it in more detail at some point.
We're going to have Kev as a special guest.
Yeah. And all sorts of strange things have happened there. It's the number of hauntings it's supposed to have had over the years are sort of not quite, but almost up to Prestbury standards. And it's a huge sprawling kind of estate that goes down in tiers to the down in walled gardens down to the sea, and there are certainly more dramatic hauntings that have been described there, and I'll see if maybe I can get some accounts from people who've also been on courses there who've seen stuff. But the thing that I found the most strange, because it was just such a understated kind of straightforward happening, is a friend of mine and I, Christian, his name is, we were in the Great Hall one day. He is a legend. And I think we were just going to leave the room, and we went to open the door, and it was a big kind of castle door, but it was one of those, it was very it was a bit loose fitting, and it was always kind of, swinging open. It wasn't like it was very old. And we went to open it, and it was absolutely immovable, and that hall is supposed to be haunted anyway, and it's just, like I say, it's just such a low-key event, but it just absolutely would not budge, wouldn't move. It wasn't like it had got caught, laughing at me again, it wasn't like it had got caught and we were we're trying to rattle it. It just absolutely wouldn't open, wouldn't budge, wouldn't move at all. And we were like, this is a really, why would the door not open? And then we discussed it, went back to it, and it just opened like I said, it was understated.
No, I know, and it's a great story, but I love the fact that it could essentially be boiled down to, do you remember that time Christian and I couldn't open the door?
Paul and myself have experienced paranormal doors in the past. And it's, yet again, St. Briavels Castle. Paul, do you remember that one with the latch?
Well, there's two that come to mind. There's the one time when we was in the refectory. Well, I was in the refectory, you was outside where the loos are. And you're saying to me, are you doing that? And I said, no. Are you doing that? And you no. And the handles are going...
So the door is closed, and each side there's a little latch for you to lift it. If you push it down your thumb, and it lifts the latch to open these big wooden doors. Paul and I are both on radios, so we can talk to each other. And I look towards the door and see the latch moving. So I said, oh, just checking, Paul, are you trying to get out or something? Because the door wasn't moving, but the latch was going. So it's like thinking, oh, is the door stuck or something? And he said, no, is it you doing it? Because he can see the other side where it's doing it as well. So we're stood on both sides with radios talking to each other, and I don't think we had video cameras with us at the time, but we had other witnesses there just going, what?
We didn't get into the solar room the one time because everybody was out and had been doing whatever we had planned for the time, and then they had to shout, so we can't get into the room. And it took ages to try and get into the room, and one of the pillows had come off the bed.
Oh, yeah.
And the closest bed is 4 or 5 foot away from the door. And it's the pillow.
That was the Great Hall, Paul. That was the Great Hall. The solar room's King John's Lounge.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. And it was behind the door, jamming it. So if it had fallen over, how did it go 5 foot across when it fell off? And we couldn't get into the room. And we had to try and poke and prod and get our arm round and try and drag this pillow out of the way. So that's 2 times with the pillow.
There's something about doors, like a significance. I mean, obviously we referred to the plough a couple of times, like the inn, but there's a haunted door at the back there, isn't there? There's a door that, they can't get it.
They can't.
Something I won't. Yeah, I think it's the opposite, isn't it? They can't get it to. They can't get it shut. It just sort of. It just. It's sort of, they'll lock it and stuff, and it'll sort of, the latch will shift and it'll open itself up and.
But in answer to these scariest ones, I found those have been the least dramatic. You tend to get scared when very little is happening, or there's a noise or something like that. When it's something really dramatic, like that pillow had somehow come off a bed that was 5 or 6 foot away and wedged under the door so we couldn't get in or out of this door, that didn't seem scary. But that's poltergeist activity. Same again, you were in the room with the stones falling, Paul? Yeah. Right, you explain the stones.
Well, that happened on multiple occasions. That was especially in the old kitchen. And on the one night we had, over a period of 2 or 3 hours, we had about 40 of the guests come in to do spend their time in the room. And the ceiling had been redone because they'd had a water leak from one of the showers upstairs, hadn't they? And so all the ceiling had been replastered, immaculate ceiling, but just little stones were falling. And the stones were the cement out of the walls. And it was that was just dropping every now and again, bonk, bonk. And I think it was Ross that had somebody say to them, oh, nothing's happened. If something happened, do something. And one went bonk and bounced off them, didn't it? But
there was a woman she was sat on a chair, and everybody had gone on about these stones all night. It happened to all of them. And she was sat on this sofa in that room and just went, oh, this is rubbish. Come on then, if there's anything going to happen, come on then, throw a stone at me now. And it literally just landed right next to her after she said the word now.
But they weren't, they were not ballistic arc, they were just bonk, bonk. I mean, even Emma, the next day, she was sat on the sofa and she was doing some work she'd taken with her. So she sat on one of the leather sofas, just crashed tight, and it's just bonk, bonk, bonk.
We're literally nowhere for these things to come from. But that, you think that was scary, but that didn't seem scary. Whereas you'll be sat in a room and a slight noise happens somewhere, but the atmosphere just totally changes and it's terrifying. And I found those things are the scariest things. A slight noise or a scratching noise or something like that is terrifying. When something flies across the room, that doesn't seem to scare people as much.
Yeah.
Well, not us as much, but it might scare other people. But that to me, I suddenly get really excited when something like that happens because it's something you can physically see. Well, Paul and I were gutted, right? Because we had 4 night vision cameras with us, and we were in a nightclub. I'd like to point out, they just ghost hunting. There was nobody else in this nightclub. There was about 10 of us ghost hunting, and a load of stuff had happened in this back bar area. So we decided, let's concentrate on one area. All right, we've got 4 night vision cameras. We've got this whole area covered. Let's just sit in here for half an hour. And a plastic pint glass lifted off the bar, went a couple of feet, scrunched up, and then threw itself to the floor. I didn't see that. I heard it, and I saw the reaction on a few people's faces who did see it, but I've got my camera pointing at them. Paul's got another camera sort of pointing towards me, you were getting wound up, weren't you, Paul, by the voice behind you?
Well, yeah, I was, just shut up. The people going, meh, 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 behind me, we're trying to do an investigation here, meh, 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 all the time, weren't there? Until we realised there's actually nobody behind there. Yeah.
We had 4 cameras, not one of them pointing in the direction of the cup that moved. Paul blatantly ignoring a ghost talking behind him when he could have turned the camera around.
I do have a habit of this. I was trying to sleep in, I think it was the constable's room one night, and the door kept, I could hear donk, 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 someone walking round, and the door kept opening, and I'm going, I'm tired, I want to go to sleep. And then the door would shut, and then later the door would open, I go, donk, 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 and I'm going, I'll just stop here. I'm trying, and it's went about 4 or 5 times until I realised, hang on, you can only open the door from the inside, and you really had to pull. It was such a tight fit, you had to really yank this door. But yet, 3 or 4 times, just donk, bonk, 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 and I'm going, I'm tired, just shut the door.
Just an image of these ghosts going, we're trying to get in touch here. Paul, please.
There's a castle full of ghosts slapping him around the head going, is there anybody there?
I feel like I should just point out that Danny just had her, I think maybe her most
I do have a specific terrifying moment.
Much scarified.
Scarifying? That's intriguing.
There's an empty crisp packet on our desk. And it just gently started rocking as Paul was describing the events of the castle.
Oh my God.
She was like pointing at it, and then I sort of very quickly realised I'm sort of half leaning on the desk, and if I shift at all, it starts to violently.
I thought, oh wow, have we got a story for everyone? But
what a 50th episode!
For it is terrifying.
Yeah, although I have told the book story a million times. However, what I might do as a special treat, I'm not going to open it. I'm not.
Just going to open the book.
No.
I'm trying to get the book.
So actually, one.
Oh, go for it, Paul.
Well, basically everything comes back to the castle all the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't scariest. I won't say stuff scary. I think you get to the point where you're used to the stuff happening. But the most one that I can't get my head around was being in the hanging room at the castle, in the room on my own, and being pushed enough to make me go and move forward like that. And you turn around and think, did I back into something? Did I touch something? But not next to anything, and something made me physically do that, and I just felt this shove. But other people had
That's happened to me in exactly the same place, Paul, and to Kate as well, if you remember.
Yeah.
She got physically thrown, kind of thing.
Yeah. Does that feel like when you feel something like that, does it... I'm trying to explain what I want to say. Does it feel like you're being pushed by a force or something? Or does it feel like...
It felt like a hand.
It feels like, wow, okay.
It felt like, as if... Well, I say not that you would necessarily feel it as a hand on the back, but if I was to push you, just go and give you a little shove in your back... That's what it felt like. But I wasn't really concentrating on anything because someone had basically said something's happening outside. So I was like, all right. And I just sorted my stuff out, and it was just bonk. And I was the only person in the room. But there has been some nasty stuff that's happened to other people that we have investigated with, as in what's felt, I'm not saying evil's the word, but something very, very sinister. Literally a darkness. There was two of our friends, colleagues, sat there, and just literally this darkness came over them in that room and just went, get out.
Oh, shit.
But we had a psychic artist, is that what you call him?
Yeah.
Doing his pictures, and he was down in King John's Lounge at the time. And actually, it was a lady, I think, that he had drew, but on it he wrote "Get Out" at the same time they was experiencing this. A floor or two upstairs.
That is. I can't deal when they speak. Okay, that's too much. Voices are too much.
Matt, I think you would have been freaked out at the castle because we would always finish the night with everybody in this one room, and it was always the best time. For about 3 or 4 investigations, 70 people in this one room, all listening to furniture being dragged around in the room above us.
Oh.
That would have freaked you out more.
And the camera never caught it.
No.
I don't know. I think in that scenario, I'd be less scared because there were 70 people, and so I think, well, if the ghost was going to kill one of us, not likely
but Matt,
to be me.
you've got to remember, this was before, so an hour or so before you were about to go to sleep in there.
Oh no! Well, I wouldn't do that. I'd bring a tent and sleep a mile down the road.
That people said they got so scared they slept in the car park. And the car park ghost is a lot scarier than the ones that are inside. Because I've heard it. I've been sat in my car. We pull up and just about to get out, and you hear something walk like on the stones and so on around the car, and you can see out the window there's nothing there, but you can hear it go around your car. And this has been reported we had people who were too scared, went out, slept in their van, got up at 3 a.m, came running back into the castle because something was outside the van.
I remember leaving the early hours, looked in the mirror to put the car in reverse, as a figure walked past the back window, and I jumped straight out of the car, and there's nobody there.
That is horrible.
Figure did that past the back window.
Can you imagine finishing the ghost hunt as well and getting back to your car to find that you didn't display parking properly and a ghost has given you a fine of all people as well?
Paul is like a conduit of some kind, like surrounded by like horrendous.
That sounds similar to what you call me sometimes, Ross.
I've called you many things, Paul. But what you find when you've been ghost hunting for a long time, and Paul and I, must be almost 20 years.
It's been 18, 20 years, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. And people get totally freaked out by things and will go on a ghost hunt, and it'll be somebody else's ghost hunt that we've come along to help out at, and we'll sit there and what we experience is very different to what other people experience. A lot of people will go ghost hunting because either they've watched Most Haunted and think it's going to be like that and they're disappointed, or they consider themselves so open their brain has fallen out that they can't critically look at a situation. And Paul and I will sit there, and these people will say about how they've experienced this, and this, and this, and we're going, we were there, and we know what that was. And in the castle, we went into a group who were freaking out because they could hear the baby crying in the room where the baby cries. And myself and Tim, I don't know if you were at this one, Paul, but Tim and I went, well, that's a lamb. And they go, no, it's a baby crying. And we're going, no, it's a lamb in that field there. Can you see the sheep in that field over there? It's lambing season, and there's sheep there. No, it's not that. And people want to experience it so much that anything, however minor, is a paranormal experience. And Paul and I know somebody who has a tendency to collapse. And then that gets classed, and then it ends up in the news that this ghost hunter was possessed and fell over and had to be hospitalized for the night or something. How many times have you seen that person do that, Paul?
Yeah, no comment.
We just avoided a court case very easily. Yeah. Well done.
So this is the book.
It's a ghost book.
But yeah, this is the book from my scariest experience, which I've spoken about so many times on the podcast, so I won't explain it again. But I would love, it's not been open since that night. And the very short summary is essentially I opened it, and then all sorts of stuff happened, and led to me leaving the.
You own the Necronomicon, don't you?
And ironically, it was given to me or left to me by my granddad, who would have no reason to haunt me in a mean way. We were very close. So I would love, and at some point we have always said in the podcast that we'd maybe have someone to come and look at it, and we'd do that as a live episode or whatever. But obviously at the moment, like, I'm not allowed to hug my mum, let alone have someone come and appraise a possibly haunted book. So it's very much on the back burner. But yeah, that is the book.
I think what we need. Sorry, Tom.
No, all I was going to say, hold that thought, Matt, is just that experience related to what Paul was saying about that kind of sense of something evil, like a kind of dark kind of.
Yeah, the worst part was walking across the car park of the flat I lived in, and this was in Cheltenham, in Cambry Court, something like that. I was walking across the car park, and we both felt, I was with an ex-partner at the time, and we were walking along, and he was very, very sceptical. And as we were walking across the car park, he was like, it's looking down on us from the lounge window, isn't it? And that was the scariest part. I didn't even turn around. But both of us just felt like there was something looking down at us, and it was a horrible, horrible presence. Definitely not Grandad.
The worst one I've had of a similar nature was walking back to my house, and just as I got my keys out to put them in the back door, my bedroom light turned itself off.
Oh.
And it was like, hang on, the door's locked, there's nobody in my house, and the light turned itself off. And that was terrifying, not because I thought it was haunted, but I thought I'd been burgled. So it was...
Sorry,
no.
Matt, what were you going to say?
Well, what I was going to say is what we really need is for someone who listens, a listener, to get in touch and say if they're about to move house, and then we can all go in, camp round theirs and open the book in their house, and it doesn't matter because it'll be for whoever moves in next has to deal with it.
There we go. That's a plan.
So if you're about to move house, get in touch.
This and you're on your moving house. I actually know my brother's due to move house soon, but he's moving to the flat above, so I'm not sure.
Right, so what you're advocating is that age-old trick where people take all the light bulbs, they put a fish down the back of the radiator or something like that. You're going to leave a poltergeist.
Spirit.
Unless the book is fine now, and that flat that you used to live in, that's just a no-go. That's just a...
Yeah, true.
No.
Danny, I'm aware of we're running out of time here. Was there more than one question? Because that was about 20 minutes off of one question.
Yeah, there were a few. So a couple of the real quickfire ones, which we can kind of answer quite quickly, is one, they were saying, could we be hired as a group for like a special occasion? And the answer is, of course, absolutely. But...
Weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs.
Yeah, sure. But obviously at the moment it's just impossible to do anything like that. We had another question about whether we do events that people could come along to and see the kind of things we're doing. Absolutely. We did one in the House Theatre.
We had planned one, hadn't we? We had planned one for January the 15th, and obviously it all got cancelled. So, that's still on the cards.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were going to do staying overnight in St. Briavels Castle that people could have joined us for. We were going to do a vigil at Playhouse Theatre in Cheltenham that people could have joined us.
Well, we did a live episode, didn't we, a while back? Yeah.
Well, also, we did, absolutely. So we will, as soon as we can, we'll start looking at, but it looks like it won't be until sort of the summertime. If we can do anything earlier, then great, and we will look to organising it, but it will be then. There's a couple of other questions, but we probably don't have enough time for this episode, so what I might do is ask if anyone else has questions that are lengthy, the rest of the questions are about sort of experiences and things, which I think will probably have to spill into future episodes, just because.
Well, on what we normally do at the end of a show is kind of wrap up by saying, here's our list of places that we've talked about that you can visit. And there kind of isn't. But I'm going to get onto the Dracula link, where we said in Yorkshire, Whitby, you can go to that place. It is haunted. Is it the Abbey or whatever that's on the top of the cliffs that Dracula goes to? Yeah. That is haunted by a nun who was bricked up in the walls, I think, for the crime of falling in love with some knight that was going off to do something. So she's floating around there. There is, you talked about Agnes Hall thing. You can't get there, but you can possibly next month but it's not in the building. But the ghost is locked up anyway. What else do we do? If you're in Yorkshire, Bolton Abbey, I think that's English heritage, but it's technically open 24 hours. You can just come and go, they can't stop you, sort of thing. That is haunted by a black monk figure, similar to the Black Abbot that's at Prestbury. That'll be coming up Easter. That's a calendar ghost. We have talked about it before. Go back and listen to some episodes. There is another one that is English heritage, that's North Yorkshire, which is it Spofforth Castle, SPO 1F or 2Fs, I can't remember, ORTH. And that's, yet again, it's one of those places that you can get to 24 hours a day, that you can't stop people wandering through it. And that had it's been seen as a female figure jumping off of one of the walls. And she's been seen like from the waist up. And that's been seen in the daytime as well. So you could, if you're going for a picnic, head that way. And one that we recorded our last video one in, you can still get to, which is Bella's Nap. So people can go and watch Bella's Nap. If you're listening to this on Spotify or wherever you're listening, head to look for the Paranormal Tourist Bella's Nap on YouTube, where you can see the three of us doing a podcast from a place that Paul has also investigated.
I guess if you're in the area as well, once everything's closed, you could walk through the churchyard. The Black Abbot churchyard. What's the name of the church? What is it? It's
just St. Presby's Church, I think.
Is it?
Presby, St. Mary's. Yeah.
St. Mary's. Yeah, St. Mary's. Yeah.
In fact, listeners of ours, Emmy and Tom went to Bella's Nap and tweeted some of their pictures. They didn't see any ghosts, in the middle of the day, but they've been there. That's the whole story. Sorry. Never said it was one of my best. Matthew, do you have any questions? It's been great to have you back.
Oh, no, I did tell, before we started recording, I did say that I had a piece of paper and a pen in front of me to write down any questions. And if I'm honest, all I've done is drawn a picture of a ghost in space. Which I'm not able to see. So,
Matthew, I've got a question for you.
No.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
On episode 4 or 5, you were going to do an experiment where you were going to follow horoscopes. And
was
then
I?
an experiment. Yes.
Was that? Well,
now, you've had a year or two to do it.
A year or two.
So what was the result of your experiment?
Well, look, I'm still here. So obviously it couldn't have been that bad. Listen, I didn't do it. I haven't done my homework. But how about I do it now?
Yeah, we can.
We can have you back in a few weeks' time.
Okay. Yeah. I solemnly swear that I will. What day is it today? It's the 10th of February. So from today until, starting tomorrow until the end of the month, so that's 17 days, I will read a horoscope and take advice from it.
Well, actually, read your horoscope, not just a horoscope.
Okay, I'll read my horoscope. Yeah. I'll read my...
The idea was you were going to follow a horoscope things for about 2 weeks to see if they were relevant, and then look at somebody else's and see if they were as relevant, and therefore proving whether it was pointless or not.
Okay, so half the time I'll do my own, and the other half I'll pick a random horoscope.
Yeah.
Okay, done.
Amazing.
Experiment started.
We'll see you in March.
Amazing. Well, I mean...
Tom, I do need to point one thing out.
Yeah.
It might be, because I can't see Paul's hands, that he's strumming that instrument, because he's in Frankenstein's Lobster.
How appropriate.
I wondered what that was.
How appropriate is that? That is, we can actually we can see evidence of where that music is coming from.
Finally,
we've got proof. It's like we're on our own ghostly.
He was always so late.
Vigil.
He was just coming in to play the theme tune.
That's what it was. That's exactly.
Ready, guys, and now.
Just getting into the studio at the very end. That's exactly where it's come from. And whilst that music is sending us out, I think it's an appropriate time to thank our guests for joining us on this. What an episode! What a 50th episode.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe by the 100th we'll be able to see people in real life.
No, we want to see people in real death.
In real
Hey.
or in real death.
Well, in that case, all that remains is to say
Thank you to Paul and Matthew especially.
goodbye. Yeah. And, but otherwise, goodbye. Thank you very much for joining us.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Goodbye. Bye.